Here we come, blue and white, and we're looking good. You'll be in for a fight, and we fight pretty good. Getting goals is our job, and we get goals good. Looking good, we are Carlisle United.
Hello everyone, you're listening to the Brunton Bugle, the number one place to get your Carlisle United fix in the podcast world. I'm Lee Rooney.
And I'm Mike Booth.
A smash and grab point for United at tabletop of Stevenage as Joe Garner hits a career goals landmark. We look back on an apparently undeserved 2-2 draw at the Lamech Stadium before looking ahead to this weekend's trip to Sincil Bank to face Lincoln City.
With a pass so true to Boulder Stone and Clark's in view. There's a cross and a run.
Just a normal, very quiet, boring week at Brunton Park, I think it's fair to say.
Standard.
Mike, yeah, you know.
Yeah.
Not much happening off the pitch. It's all very quiet there. Of course, it's not.
It's very nice of them to do it before we've recorded, though.
I would like to thank them and anyone who's been involved in helping them with that to get it out on it was Wednesday. It was yesterday, wasn't it? Yeah. Got it out. We're recording on Thursday, so just in time for us to fit it in. We will be talking about the Cashel Sports Group statement in a short while. Also, obviously, the usual stuff today. We'll be looking back on that 2-2 draw at Stevenage, which Steve Evans seems to think we didn't deserve. Looking at this weekend's trip to Lincoln City, including catch up with a Lincoln City fan and the usual X-Files and other news and things like that. So, yeah, plenty to cover this week. Mike, how have you been getting on?
Yeah, good. Yeah. Things are looking a bit more positive than when I was last on. Especially, we've got up a place this week without even playing a game as well, thanks to Reading having some points deducted.
I think we were already ahead of them, weren't we? I think we were already 1 point ahead of them. They were only on 5 points, so they've dropped down to 2 now. I mean,
yeah.
What a desperate situation for them. It's just that I saw something the other day saying that the team that's taken the most points off them in the last few years has been their owner. Basically, for the amount of points they've had deducted, it's cost them the most points, which is astonishing, really, isn't it, when you think about it?
That's mad.
Yes, so before we get going, just a reminder, of course, that the podcast this season, for the third season in a row, is been sponsored by the Carlisle United Sports Club London branch. London branch have got members all across the world. You can join them anywhere, wherever you live, whether you live in Liverpool, like us, Liverpool or Formby. If you live in,
Jacksonville, Florida,
get yourself signed up.
Yeah.
Go on, let's get the Piatics. We've been told Piatic is the correct pronunciation, by the way. We'll talk about that in a sec. But yeah, I did say Istanbul last week, and I did not know anything about this Turkish consortium before I said that, by the way. That was just a complete fluke of a choice. But yeah, wherever you live in the world, get yourself signed up to the London branch. They arrange travel for away games and get tickets as well, and they do a lot of fundraising for the club. If you want to find out more about London branch, go to the website, carlisle.londonbranch.org, or grab one of the guys at one of the away games. They're usually selling Hit the Bar, and they'll be happy to chat you through things. Right, Mike, before we go to news, Dan has done a question of the week for us. So here is the question.
One of the most famous games against Lincoln was the infamous Battle of Sincil Bank in August 2002. A game which Carlisle won 1-0 through Trevor Malloy scoring a penalty, which we had 3 players sent off. Those players being Richie Foran early on, Brian Shelley in 76 minutes, and Trevor Malloy in the last minute. Who were the remaining 8 players who made up our starting 11 that day?
Ooh, that's a good question, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's a really good question. Tell you what, we won't answer it now. We'll come back to it later in the show to give everyone else a chance to think about it as well.
What was that, 2001?
2002. It was just after John Courtney had taken over.
Yeah.
What I remember about that game is that Darren Kelly was in the away end. He was being paraded because he'd just been signed from Derry City at that point. So he wasn't in the starting 11, but I know he was involved that day in the crowd, at least anyway. Right, Mike, let's get into the news then. Not really much to cover, is there? To be honest, it's a quiet week.
We've got a new head of performance appointed. That's, yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing. Now, we'll cover the main bit of news first. So, this emerged last night. A Twitter account appeared, Cashel Sports Group, who are it's like a holding company, I think, that have basically been set up by the Piatic, and it is Piatic. We have double checked with that with the guys at Kiosk. It's Piatic family have set up as part of their basically plans to take over the club, and it just provided a bit more background to us finally, didn't it? It's just nice to. I really appreciate the fact that they've got everything done behind the scenes, as much as they can done behind the scenes to this point, and now they're coming to speak to us, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. And they seem to have gone about it the right way in so many ways as well. And they talk about the community aspect of it. And I really like the fact that they've been kind of incognito. I can't remember what the game was now.
It was the Exeter game, wasn't it?
Exeter, yeah. And they've seen and experienced a match like us fans do. And I really appreciate that. I think that the statement... There's just the one concerning paragraph, really, isn't there? But the rest of it looks very positive to me.
And it's not concerning on their behalf, I should say, by the way. That they're going to make that clear. So, yeah, it's really good. Obviously, it basically makes clear in the opening paragraphs that they are looking to invest and take control, or change of control of the club. So it's a takeover. They're not saying the word takeover, but it's a takeover. Let's just make it very clear that they made it clear that they're really pleased with the work they've done with the club so far. And interesting as well, they mentioned the fact that obviously any transaction subject to contract, EFL approval and participation of kiosks. Now I think this is something that kiosks deserve a bit more credit for. And Dan's not here this week. It's kind of semi-deliberate that, because that means me and you can talk a bit more openly about this, because obviously Dan is vice chair of kiosks, so he can't really say too much. We can, he doesn't tell us anything. I have to say, he's not giving us any inside info on this. We've found out at the same time all you guys have. I think kiosks deserve a bit more credit than they get for this. They've put out their weekly article in the News and Star this week, and it's quite punchy, actually, isn't it? It's quite defending themselves for some of the stick they get online, and I think fair play to them for once. Far too often they've, in the past, yes, I would agree, they probably deserve a bit of stick for some of the things that have happened, but there can't be any doubt they've played a huge part in what's happened so far with the Piatics, haven't they?
Yeah, definitely. And that article today alludes to the fact that they've met with them a few times, and that the Piatics' enthusiasm towards the club is infectious, and that's brilliant. That's what you want. And I've said all along, once this club bites its teeth into you, there's not a lot of getting away from it.
It's tough, isn't it? Yeah, you can't shake it off. I mean, I'm looking at it'll be 29 years for me this Christmas, basically, that I've been following. It is very, very hard to shake off. But you're right, and like I said, I think they deserve a bit more credit. They've clearly been involved from the very start here, and they're clearly helping drive this. So fair play to them, for being involved. And hopefully, obviously we've got this meeting coming up the day after the Derby County game that kiosk members are able to attend. It's a shame that it's not open to all fans, but there's obviously reasons for that, because I know kiosk did want it to be originally. But the thing is, there's going to be 300 people in that room. There's going to be countless more watching online on the stream. The word will get out what's said there anyway, so there's no need to panic about it. It's not going to be top secret. No one's going to hear a single thing. We're going to get an idea of what's happened at the end of the day. We'll talk about the concerning paragraph before we talk about some of the other bits that they've said in there quickly. Obviously, the pure pay debt is the thing that's come up as basically a concern, isn't it? So they've basically said, to quote, I'll quote from that paragraph actually. While we want to emphasise that these discussions are in advanced stages, there remains one significant hurdle: resolution of the pure pay debt. Despite the current club shareholders and directors' best efforts over the past year to resolve the debt issue, it remains open at this time. The pure pay debt must be resolved for this transaction to move forward. Once resolved, we believe this could mark a significant milestone in the club's journey and an extraordinary opportunity for the club, and one we are excited about. So there's a lot of talk about this online. There's a lot of people saying, why don't the current owners just pay it up or whatever? I think people have been a bit unrealistic about what happens in a takeover. When you take over a company with debt, it's not that often that the people who actually own the company at that point will pay off that debt, especially as, let's be honest, they're not going to get... The chances are they're going to sell this club for next to nothing, basically. They're not going to get any money out of it themselves. It's moving on to someone who can actually take it on, and we don't know that yet, but that's the impression you get from it.
I would hope so, yeah.
So I wonder if there's some sort of work going on. The problem is the debt's tied with personal guarantees, and it's links to, holds over Brunton Park and things like that. So it's complicated. I'd imagine the Piatics are basically trying to, get this sorted in a way that when they come in, it's not an issue. Not so much. I wouldn't be surprised if they are looking to pay a chunk of it at the very least. And I do wonder if there's a feeling there of like, well, if we can agree a decent deal here and we don't have to pay the whole thing in one full swoop, at least we can then pump some money straight into the club straight away in terms of infrastructure and things like that. It's getting a decent deal because you don't want to just throw £3 million or just under £3 million straight at it because, if you get that down to, let's say, 2 million, I'm just off the top of my head picking out numbers here, that saves you £1 million. You can straight away say, right, we're going to pump that straight into building a training ground or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of money could do so much good for the club.
Yeah.
Not Philip Day's pocket, because he has nothing to do with Pure Pay whatsoever, he doesn't. Apparently.
No, definitely doesn't. So it's something that needs sorted, but look, the fact that they're at the exclusivity stage, they're talking about their plans now, they can have a public meeting with fans, suggests that they must have some sort of plan to deal with that in some way, shape or form, if needs be. So hopefully this is just trying to iron out the fine details in that. And, we know the club put an offer to the guys at Pure Pay in terms of repaying the debt back in August. They haven't had a response yet. So hopefully this might just nudge them on slightly because, if the Payatics have been involved at that stage, then they must be quite happy with the offer that was put to Pure Pay in terms of that. So that's where it is. In terms of
I was just going to say as well. I remember, I think when Crawley's takeover with their American owners was around this stage, we'd already seen like so many red flags, and there just isn't that here for me. And the way they talk about investing in infrastructure and stuff, they clearly have a plan in place. It's not just like throw a load of money at the team, let's get 100%. To the Premier League in 5 years. There's clearly a plan in place.
You're absolutely right there, Mike. And I can't tell you how happy I am not to see the words, we want to get you to the Championship or the Premier League within X number of seasons. Don't want to hear that. I just want to hear, we're going to build a proper club here. We're going to work with, the ambition, they said, they've got ambitions to expand our presence in the game. A bold step in the ambition to elevate the club to new heights and fill its potential. There's no setting a target of an actual position. You just say we just want to get the club better. The community stuff. We've heard stories about the fact that they're clearly very strong in the community over there. Look how many sports clubs and leagues they sponsor over in America. They're involved with the Jacksonville Jaguars as well at NFL level, and they're clearly really strong on that side of it. I mean, the business itself, it employs former veterans, doesn't it? It gets them into work after they've been, come out of the army and stuff, which is fantastic. It's that, really positive in terms of that. And apparently they do this thing like a food truck thing on Fridays for their staff as well. And that's quite a popular thing over in America with some companies. So, I mean, it shows they really grasp that side of it. And that should be encouraging straight away. There's no talks of, like you said, with the Crawley stuff, there was all about NFTs and how much money we can make. And stuff. No, that's not what we're hearing here, is it?
Exactly. And I think as well, sort of reading between the lines a little bit, some clubs, I mean, our location is what it is. It always has been. Some clubs would offer a player a lot more money to sign for them than, say, a club in that sort of, M62 corridor. But I think we want to be able to offer players the same amount, but be able to say, but look at us, look at our training facilities, look at what we've got going on here, and we want players to want to sign for us for the club, not for the money, for the club.
Yeah, we have something like what Fleet would have got. I mean, their facility, if you've not seen the photos from it, it's incredible. Compared against what we got at Brunton Park, it's amazing facility for their training ground. We want that so players come to us, so we have our little development squad of players who are building up, like a reserve team and things like that. That's what you want. The final bullet point about exciting possibilities is encouraging as well. Increase support of recruiting and retaining players. I mean, could that be in terms of once the deal's done, you get Owen Moxon tied down to a longer deal, maybe something like that?
Hopefully.
Improving facilities and development of enhanced match day experiences for us. I mean, will we get a roof on the fan zone finally? That's what we've been praying for. Maybe even a permanent building there would be fantastic, wouldn't it? Something like that. And obviously they mentioned the fact, they want as much of their initial investment to stay in the club to bring the maximum benefit to the club from the start. So that line actually is one that people don't seem to have picked up on. So we want to see as much of our initial investment to stay in the club to bring the maximum benefit to the club from the start. Well, that suggests that they're thinking, well, we don't want to have to chuck this £3 million at the debt. If we could get that, we could say, look, we're going to pay you in one go here, so you don't have to wait for it. But will you reduce the amount we have to pay or something like that, so we can put money into the club? That might be what it's suggesting.
And it's used to the word investment for me as well. Like, they haven't ruled out sort of money for the transfer market, but for me, I think, if we could, say, buy a player from Scotland or Ireland or somewhere for 100 grand who 3 years from now goes for millions, because so many other clubs at our level seem to be able to do that. But you need the money to start off with to invest it in one of these players. And, hopefully that's what, I don't want to see us splashing out 500 grand on a 28-year-old from Harrogate, maybe spend a couple of $100,000 on a young up-and-coming player that we can sell for a big profit down the line.
Kind of the way that Peterborough United have done stuff in past seasons,
Yeah.
And then basically work yourself think, right, when it gets to a certain point, if they're not going to extend the deal, well, we're going to sell you and we're going to make the money off you. Which is a sensible way of doing it. They got caught out a little bit with Clark Harris, didn't they, in the transfer deadline day, but that's just the way it is with that one, I guess. So all round, we're pretty happy with the statement. There's a bit of caution in there, but, please understand that it's still at a sensitive stage and, they won't be able to tell us every single thing, but I'm really looking forward to this meeting. I'm not going to be able to attend in person by the looks of things. I'm probably going to have to watch the stream. I think you're going to do that as well, aren't you, Mike? I think so.
Yeah.
We'll be watching that online with great interest, and I know a lot of other people I spoke to really encouraged. Should be noted in terms of takeover news, there was a bit of news that broke, obviously just after we recorded last week, me and Nick, about interest from a Turkish/Northeast consortium. They put a bid into the club. Now this was leaked via a guy who's he's a Twitter sort of sports reporter who in the past has been very good at getting stories about transfers in early. Something did emerge recently that he may well be running a football agency's Twitter account at the same time, which is a little bit funny, that isn't it? But it obviously came to him. I've said this before, and I've said this a million times. People who do take over things out in public are not serious. A good friend of mine Ian has always said that. Anyone who tries to run a takeover out in the public is not a serious bidder. And that's why I'm so impressed with the Piatics, the fact that they've kept it all behind the scenes until this point.
From what I understand as well, they contacted the club and basically said, you've got 24 hours to get back to us or we'll leak it. You wanted to buy a football club, you're not holding someone hostage. What? Yeah.
It's not a serious way of doing it. Look, if the Piatic stuff doesn't work out, maybe they'll go back and actually have a look at it again, possibly. But the thing is, surely they must have realised when they put this bid in, when you've got to this point and it's been going for, 5+ months, probably longer, it's going to be at a point of exclusivity to that one, bidder at that point. So what's the point of putting a bid in when the club can't actually even look at it technically from the legal viewpoint? So, it's not really a relevant figure at the moment. It may well come back. I don't know. You never know, but we'll have to wait and see with that one.
I'm taking it with a pinch of salt.
Yes, indeed. Just a couple of little bits of other news to cover before we get onto the Stevenage review, Mike. As you mentioned at the start, head of performance has been appointed. This was advertised in the summer after we got promoted. And United have finally confirmed he'll be taking on the role. And it's a familiar face coming to Brunton Park, isn't it?
Yeah, Jake Simpson.
Jake Simpson, yes. So that's Jake is the son of Blues boss Paul. He's joined the club after holding a similar role at Stockport County since February 2022. Really interesting appointment, isn't it? Again, it's one of these things that shows that the club is trying to move forward and be a bit more professional and serious at this level, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I was thinking about this the other day, actually. I think one of the things for me that makes Simo such a good manager is that he's old school in a lot of ways, but he's also embraced a lot of these new things like sports science, data analysis, all of that sort of stuff. And he's kind of got the best of both worlds, whereas some old school managers don't embrace that and they kind of just get left by the wayside a little bit.
Simo's got a degree in sports science, hasn't he? I'm sure he's done something like that at the very least. So, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Obviously, Jake's followed in his footsteps there. He's had an okay career himself. I think he did quite well when he was at Workington as well. I think he was quite a good player for them. But I think he's settled in Carlisle anyway, so I think it's an ideal move for him to move back up with Paul. Interesting, Simo did basically explain that basically he will overlook the performance department, an area that I think they've been looking to expand since he came back as boss for the second time. But one of the things it'll help with, alongside the new what's the title of the fitness coach again? I can't remember now.
Sports and conditioning.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, so the strength and conditioning.
Yeah, that's
coach.
it.
So Jamie Roper, who's currently in that role, he's leaving to set up his own business, I think. So they're currently recruiting for his replacement. And I think the idea is that one of them will stay back on away games and work with the players who aren't playing that weekend to make sure they get a proper session on the Saturday while the players are playing their game. So, that again, it's little things like that you never really think about, do you? Really? So it's really nice to see these things moving forward. So, Jake is now officially appointed into his role. Last bit of news, Mike, something that emerged as well late last week, the Waterworks end. So there was a bit of talk. So Derby County have basically sold out their allocation for the game next weekend against us at Brunton Park. So there was talk, we're going to give them the Waterworks end because they sold it out very quickly. And I don't think it even got to members. It only went to season ticket holders.
Yeah, it sold out in like 5 minutes.
It was something insane, wasn't it? They sold them very, very quickly. Turns out the answer to that is no. United are opening up the Waterworks end to home fans for the game against Derby. I think the expectation is we're going to get probably 10k plus home fans for this game anyway, aren't we? So actually, I don't mind them opening it up because at least that way you're not quite as cramped in there as well. And I think having it a little bit more spacious might make it a more enjoyable experience for people. It sounds a weird thing to say, but also...
Look, I see it the other way though. Like sometimes if you're all crammed in together, it often creates a better atmosphere.
That's true. That's a fair point. What I'd say is that from what I've heard, Simo as well is not keen on the idea of having fans behind one of the goals. Yeah. He would rather have our fans behind both goals, and we saw from the the playoff games and the games against Southern stuff like that. It does have a positive effect. It does lift the crowd quite the team. So yeah, good news that. So if you haven't got your tickets to that one, get them as soon as you can because it's the first time we'll have met them in a league fixture since February 1984. Before even I was born. And I'm an old kid these days. So, there you go. Right, Mike, let's get on to it. Stevenage review. Stevenage 2, Carl United 2. An undeserved point according to Steve Evans.
Well, I can maybe see his point, but, you could argue that the Port Vale away game, we deserved something out of it and we lost. So, swings and roundabouts. Sometimes it works in your favour, sometimes it goes against you.
Yeah, I have to say, I think this is a fantastic point, especially following up on that the win against Shrewsbury. Just to get anything from this game was a real bonus, I think. And they're flying high at the start of the season. I still think they'll probably be somewhere up there towards the end of the season. I don't think they'll be top 3, but I think they'll probably be skirted around that final playoff place. But yeah, I mean, when you look at the bare stats, you must be pretty happy to get a point from this one.
2 shots on target, 2 goals. We went from other games, we're having multiple shots on target and no goals. So, we seem to be getting a little bit more clinical, and if we can create more chances, we'll hopefully batter someone.
Yeah. So when the teams were announced for this game, Mike, were you surprised at the one change? I think we all saw it coming, didn't we, I think, to be fair?
I think looking before the game, you've got your Holy Andresson debate. Andresson, by all accounts, had a fantastic game. I think that's our strongest team.
Yeah, I think Kayode coming in for Plans just made sense, didn't it, really? Coyote's not coming in to sit on the bench. He's going to be starting most weeks, you'd imagine. And I think it's whoever plays alongside him will be the difference, I think. The only other change was obviously Plans dropped to the bench and Jordan Harris dropped off the bench for this one. Onto the actual action. I mean, the first proper real chance, I think, for both sides was probably the opening goal, wasn't it? It's just a goal from a set piece and a bit frustrating one, really, defensively, wasn't it? So Finback gives away a free kick only a few yards into our half, so it's not that too dangerous a position. They launched the ball into the box from Butler. It was nodded down by Pierre Gianni, and I think Callum Guy just loses sight of Jamie Reid, and he nips in and pokes the ball past Andresson to give them the lead, doesn't he?
Yeah, for me, I think Andresson could have maybe come out to claim that initial ball into the box, to be honest.
I think it was a little bit too close to the edge of the box for him to claim it. I think he maybe could have been sharper to the nod down, possibly. I'm probably being a little bit harsh there because I think he maybe would have expected Reid to be marked a bit better by the defenders. So it's a frustrating one because it's not the most pretty looking goal, is it? It's
no.
Long free kick, nod down, bang, strikers in to score. Frustrating. Very nearly got a second one not long after that where another free kick to the box was nodded down to Robertson, the edge box. He hit a low left foot first time volley that Andresson brilliantly palmed away, actually, because he didn't see this till late, did he? It was a really good save, this one. And then first chance, first shot, and United equalise through Sean Maguire, don't they? I mean, it turns out apparently he was offside, is what Steve Evans is telling
the
the world
letter,
today.
haven't they?
Yeah, they've had apparently one of those letters from the FA that we were collecting for fun last season. But so basically a very direct but quite effective goal. So Armour picked the ball up in our half, sends a first-time ball over the top, perfectly timed for Maguire to run onto it. Obviously not quite perfectly timed from his run, but he's through on goal. I thought he'd messed up at first, did you?
Yeah.
It looks like he completely messed the chance up, but he managed to get a shot away, and I think it flicks up off the defender's leg and just sort of over the keeper and into the back of the net, doesn't it? And Sean Maguire off the mark for the season must be quite pleasing to see too.
Well, in his head, he scored against Shrewsbury as well, so in his head, he's got 2 for 2, so... Yeah,
I'm absolutely not having it that he.
No, but he'll clearly have a lot of confidence now, and I think that's something that we were lacking. It was not necessarily confidence as a team, but confidence from an individual point of view, and that strikers just needed to get that first goal to give them a lift and relax a little bit. And Maguire's off the mark now.
Yep, really, really good stuff. Anderson was called into action again. With a couple more chances. There was one where McNeil had a shot from the edge of the box that he palmed over the bar. Another where Armour was beaten by a long ball over top from Reed, and his shot was again saved by Anderson's feet. Sorry, I'm just trying to read the chances through here. Another corner this time in the second half from the left. Pierre Gianni met with a header, came back off the crossbar. Another Pierre Gianni header that was this time palmed behind by Anderson. Living a bit of a charmed life, wasn't it? The goal at the start of the second half, especially. I think it's fair to say. And then Reed gets his second goal. And this was a frustrating one because we were on the attack. We lose the ball. And then I think Jack Armour got just a little bit too attracted to chasing the ball on the right wing. He doesn't get it. And then McCalmont doesn't really do well enough to stop Roberts, who beats him a bit easily.
Tripped him up, to be honest.
Yeah, and Roberts plays a cross-field ball into the space where Armour had been to Reed. Guy just lets him get past him a bit too easily, do you think? I think he can do a little bit better. I think he's a bit nervous about maybe giving away a penalty, but there's no real attempt at all to get the ball, is it?
I think there's a few players who could have done a lot better there.
Yeah.
And,
I mean,
McCalmont, like I said, and I think Guy as well, yeah.
I mean, there's an argument as well. Anderson shouldn't be getting beaten from such a tight angle, but it's a well-struck shot, to be fair. Probably being harsh for that, to be fair. And Reed nearly got a hat-trick not long after that as well, to be fair. He got a ball over the top and he shrugged off Mellish to get through on goal. But again, brilliant save by Anderson. We keep saying it, don't we? We're going to be talking about him in a minute and his performance, definitely. And then United had a really good penalty shot, didn't they? Now, they've just got a grip of the game in the last 5 or 10 minutes. They just stayed in the game. Then suddenly something switched after the subs were made. And ball over the top, Terry Ablade, away on the left. And he's tripped inside the box, isn't he?
Yeah, it's inside the box, 100%.
I mean, it's only just inside, but he's inside the box. And referee Darren Drysdale, he did not have a great game, to be honest. He gave some weird decisions to both sides. He couldn't really keep up with play half the time. He awarded a free kick on the edge of the box, which is just baffling decision, wasn't it? From the free kick, it was an absolute beauty from Moxon, wasn't it? Whipped in with pace, and it just needed a flick off someone to go in the back of the net, and Roddy went wide of the far post. And then came the equaliser. So Armour won a corner on the left. Moxon goes over, sends in a right-footed in-swinger to the far post, and fair play to Joe Garner. Does brilliantly, because he's been held all over the shop. You see the photos of it up close. He's been held back, and he manages to get his head on it. The keeper tries to claw it out, but it's gone well over the line, and the linesman flags. And those fans behind the goal, including our 6-second reviewer today, Johnny Outwood, were going absolutely mad with the players at the front, weren't they? They were really loving it.
Yeah, it's worth noting that the official highlights don't show a very good footage of this goal. But the Warwick Road End has a Twitter account, has a YouTube account, and they're behind the goal. And obviously, whoever's holding the camera is going a bit mental, but it's still better footage than of the official highlights. So it's worth checking out.
Wouldn't take much, would it? Wouldn't take much. But yeah, so fantastic. Stevenage did nearly nick it at the end, though, didn't they? There was a chance for Roberts late on with a deep cross into the box, and Anderson once again brilliantly to tip it over the bar. And yeah, we held on and got the point, as we say, arguably undeserved, but there's nothing better than the smash and grab, is there really? When you come in and, take your chances and you come away with something.
Yeah, God knows how many times that's happened against us before now. So, yeah, you've got to enjoy it when you're the team doing it.
And it shows the fighting spirit we've got, isn't it? Even in it, probably the first game this season where we've been dominated for most of the 90 minutes, we've actually managed to come away with something from the game, haven't we?
Yeah, definitely. It shows real character that, coming back from behind twice and you're under the cosh a lot. Yeah, and it shows as well, Simo's whole starters and finishers thing, just how vital that is and how the finishes are just as important as the starters. And I think if Joe Garner's role for this season is to just come on off the bench and cause havoc for the last 15 minutes, well, he's very good at it.
Yeah, it's one of those ones you look and obviously at the moment Ryan Edmondson's not getting his chance. He's not even on the bench for games. He maybe needs to look at how Joe's playing in these games and try and learn a few things from him and see, well, how can I do that? How can I be the player who's being the nuisance and coming on and causing problems later on in games? Because at the end of the day, he's got about 5 or 6 inches on Garner in terms of height, hasn't he? So he should really be the one who's starting those games, but he's not at the moment. So
no, I'm a fan of his, but he doesn't really have much of a case to be playing at the minute.
No, all the other subs are playing their part, and just unlucky, I suppose, for Ryan that he didn't take his chance when he had it. But I'm sure he will get more chances this season. He's a good player, we know that. Well, let's talk about some individual performances then. Well, there's only one place to start, isn't there? Icelandic man cometh, Jokkul Andresson, he's international weekend, not involved with his international squad, but we're pretty glad he wasn't, weren't we? Because he had a terrific game, didn't he?
Yeah, he really did. I mean, you and me were both quite cynical because as fully paid up members of the Thomas Holy fan club. But yeah, sounds like he had a fantastic game. Yeah, there's not a lot more you can say than that, really. It sounds like if it wasn't for him, we would have probably conceded 5 or 6 goals. So
yeah, he had a brilliant game. I should say, when we mentioned the chance there, what we didn't mention actually was that he did have a little rick in the second half, though, where he spilled the ball straight to Pierre Gianni, put it in the back of the net, but it was disallowed for offside, which apparently wasn't offside, so he's got away with one there, possibly. So he's got to be careful with these, because that's a couple in recent games, and he's... Holy did those occasionally, but they were quite well spread out. It wasn't like he was doing them every other game, was it? So it's, you've got to be careful of that. What I would say is, a word of caution on this, you really don't want your keeper to be getting man of the match every week. A one-off game like this every now and then is great. This is the thing. People might say, we've never seen a performance like that from Holy. Well, that's because we've never really had a game like that with Holy, where we got dominated by anyone. So you've not had to do that in that sense. So there's nothing to say Thomas wouldn't have put the performance in that was similar to that. Things might have been different in terms of the set pieces. We might have been able to claim a few more of them, from crosses and stuff. But fair play to him. He stuck at it, and he looks like a fantastic shot stopper. I have to say that I'm really impressed with that side of it. So if you can work on coming for crosses and things like that a little bit more, we've potentially got a really good keeper on our hands for this season. So yeah, great stuff from Jokkul. Sean Maguire, great to see him get off the mark, isn't it? I think we said that earlier. Following on from his involvement in the goal last week, I think you said this before, and I think I agree with you. I think we've got a real player on our hands if we can keep him fit. I think he's someone who can really be so good at this level. There was one moment where I felt like he could have got to a ball and he sort of slowed up a little bit. I think that's maybe knowing not to push his body too much potentially there. So that's smart in that sense. But all the signs so far are pretty good for him, aren't they?
Yeah, and what you said then, it's worth noting he didn't have the best of pre-seasons. No. So he's still probably not quite 100% match fit. But yeah, I think intelligence-wise as well, he's just playing 9-dimensional chess with some of the things he's doing. And the little flicks and things he does. It's so obvious that he's played the game at a higher level. And if players can sort of really start to cotton on to some of his little flicks and stuff, I think he'll just get better and better. Definitely.
JJ Kayode. So that's the first time I've seen him since he returned. Tell you what, he looks like he's a much bigger player, doesn't he? That's the first thing because I watched the game on the iFollow because it was obviously available last weekend due to the international weekend, and he definitely looks like he's bulked out a bit. And he's probably gained a couple of inches in height as well. I think because I think he's about 6'3" last time. He looks more like 6'5", I reckon now, and. Once again, winning all his headers, and we only got to see one of his long throws just because of the circumstances of the weekend. We didn't really get too many throws in those positions, but I tell you what, he's going to be an asset, really, isn't he?
Definitely. I think the only way, really, that you can contain him is by doubling up on him. And if you're doing that, then you're freeing up space for someone else, a Maguire or someone to get into space. So, I think even in games where he might not do a lot, I think he will be doing a lot for us by dragging opposition players away from our players.
Yeah, definitely. Talk about some of the subs then. Had a positive impact on the game, didn't they? McCalman had to come on for Jordan Gibson, it should be said. Gibson a little bit unlucky that he got an early booking for an absolutely nothing tackle, really. That wasn't even it wasn't even that cynical. It was a ridiculous decision. And then he probably could have gone because he gave another foul when he argued with the ref, didn't he? I think Simo took him off for his own good at that point.
Yeah, well, I think both, the booking and the nearly sent off were never fouls, really, anyway. It sounded like the ref had a shocker. I mean, obviously, he sent Stevenage 2 letters, but it sounds like he was kind of their 12th man a little bit from what I was hearing on the radio.
Yeah, but the other two subs, I've got to say, Garner and Ablade, fantastic again. I mean, Terry's pace is terrifying. Like, there was a couple of times he got away down the left and you thought, right, you can cause some problems here. And Joe Garner, again, he's just a nuisance and he was putting himself about. He was winning a couple of free kicks. He's smart now. I think he knows he's going to be a sub for most games this season, and he seems fine with that. That's good. We were worried. Well, we felt he might end up leaving before the end of the window, but Simo clearly sees a role for him, doesn't he? And
but can you imagine being a centre back that's been dealing with Kayode for 60 minutes, and then you've got Joe Garner to deal with?
Yeah, just so frustrating. 150th career goal for him. What a brilliant achievement, though, isn't it?
Yeah, brilliant. And obviously his first career goal was with us as well.
Yeah, I think about 20% of his goals have come for us, haven't they? About 30 odd I think he's got for us, so fantastic.
He scored quite a few during that second spell with us. People forget about that.
Yeah, it was at 18-15 or something like that, I think it was. I seem to remember. Yeah, he had a really strong streak, and then obviously the Preston came in and bought him, so just frustrating that we could have got him permanently back then maybe, but never mind. But yeah, fair play to lad, he's done brilliantly. Thoughts on Stevenage before we sort of wrap this bit up, Mike? How do you see them this season? I feel like they've clearly signed very well and they've got some real strength and depth. They're a very direct side, but they're so effective, aren't they? Especially set pieces. They seem to know what they're doing so much in those, don't they?
Yeah, definitely. And I think other teams, they'll obviously do their homework on Stevenage, and players will be told how Stevenage are going to play, and they're going to try and frustrate you and blah 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 blah. But we've actually played against them last season and kind of are more accustomed to it. Whereas a lot of these other teams that were in League One last season, you get told, oh, they're going to frustrate you and this and that and the other. And you think, yeah, we'll deal with that. But then when you're getting frustrated, your head goes out the window and your game plan goes out the window. And that's what Stevenage are very good at. And unless you've personally dealt with that, you're going to struggle to deal with it. And I think we all said in the pre-season preview that Stevenage were our dark horses. We said it last season, and I think we said it again this season. I
think a couple of us said we thought they would do okay this season. We certainly didn't think they would be in trouble, and I've got to say that they like to play that diagonal ball across the top, and they're so accurate with it. It's so well worked. You've got to give them credit, to be fair. They're very effective. They certainly know what they're doing, so fair play to them. Right, just to wrap this bit up, we'll do the 6-second review now, which is Johnny, who was at the game, so he sent us one in.
So we always knew it was going to be a difficult game down there at Stevenage, obviously in that heat. If you'd offered me 2-2 before the game, I probably would have took it. I think Andresson, outstanding, wasn't he? He'll be disappointed with the second, but those saves that he made during that game just kept us in it, didn't they? Just really, really good. Obviously, we've given away that goal on the 15th minute. I thought we did really well to bounce back quickly. Maguire going through on goal, he just looked calm, he looked confident. He looks a much more confident player than what he did when he first got here, I think. He's going to be a good signing. Kayode, he's going to need a couple of weeks just to bed into the team, isn't he? And just get a bit of fitness and just work out where he fits into everything. But I think we're going to be a better team for him. Garner and Ablade, I don't think anyone really expected this, but I think they're going to be a huge pair in this season. I think you bring them on with 20 minutes to go. Ablade is just so fast, isn't he? Just worries defences. I don't know how many goals he'll score, but he's great to have there. And bring him on with Garner, doing what Garner does, it's just excellent to have an option on the bench there, isn't it? We were down twice, and I thought, yeah, obviously Stevenage were probably the better team, but that confidence and belief to get back into the game, knowing that we can score goals, is something that has been lacking, and I think it's a definite positive out of the afternoon. On to Lincoln now. Hopefully get something out that game, and then a massive game back at Brunton Park week after, isn't it?
Well, there you go. Pretty straightforward there from Johnny, wasn't it? You know,
yep.
Fair points. Should say, we did forget to mention the heat. It looked,
yeah.
I mean, it was what, 30, 32 degrees, something like that?
Yeah.
I would not have fancied playing out that. Actually, I give the team a bit of credit for playing the full 90 and lasting that long as well in that heat, because it didn't look much fun at all. So there you go. Just to wrap up this half of the show, Mike, we'll look at the results from League One. Well, there's only one to cover, isn't there? Because bizarrely, all the other 10 games had one of the teams had 3 internationals that weekend, so the games were postponed, which you don't see that often at League One level, do you? Sometimes, you obviously Championship level you see it because they all get called off, but maybe 2 or 3 sometimes. But yeah, so the only other game on was Exeter City against Leyton Orient, and Leyton Orient got a 92nd minute winner in this one to win 2-1 at St James's Park. So that's a terrific result for Orient, because they had a tough start to the season, and a little bit of a surprise one for Exeter, getting a bit caught out there. But I think I just said this after when we played them. I felt like the position was a little bit false, Exeter. I think they had some easier games in the start of the season, so you might see them drop off a little bit now, but they won't be in trouble, I don't think. They've probably got enough to keep themselves away from that. So fair play. And that's it, I think. Anything else to cover?
No, I think that's it, yeah.
Cool, right, we'll take a short break and we'll be back to preview the Lincoln City game.
Hi, it's Ryan Edmondson from Carlisle United, and you're listening to the Brunton Bugle.
There you go. Got another new one there. Thank you, Dan, for sorting that one out for us this week when he was at the sponsors photo day at Brunton Park. Got to give Edmo some credit for doing similar to Simo there and telling us that he's from Carlisle United there, as if we didn't know he was a Carlisle United player, like a random Ryan Edmondson who got to do that. But there you go. Thank you very much, Ryan, for doing that one for us. Into the second half of the show. Do we want to do the answer now, or do we want to wait until the X-Blue section?
Go on, we'll do it now.
Right, so let's have a quick reminder of the question from Dan. In fact, should I play the reminder because it's quite long? Basically, when we played Lincoln City in 2002, August 2002, the Battle of Sincil Bank, we had 3 players sent off that day: Malloy, Foreign and Shelley. Who were the remaining 8 players from the starting 11 that day? I'm 99% certain Peter Keane was in goals this game, because I remember Lincoln had a penalty, and I think he might have got a slight touch onto it, but he basically hit one post, rolled across the line, and went out for a corner or a goal kick on the other side. So Peter Keane was in goal. We know Brian Shelley was at right back, don't we?
Yes. Lee Andrews?
Was Lee Andrews still playing? Trying to think who'd played the season before at centre back for us. I'm fairly sure we still had Dave Morley at that point, didn't we?
I've no idea.
Yes, I think Dave Morley might have been one of the centre backs, possibly. Stuart Whitehead, maybe. Stuart White and Dave Morley to be your 2 centre backs.
Peter Murphy?
Peter Murphy might have been left back actually at that point, possibly. So we'll go Peter Keane, Stuart Whitehead, Dave Morley, Peter Murphy. Brendan McGill, would he re-signed by then? I don't know if he had actually.
Not sure. I feel
I feel like he. No, I feel like he had done actually. I've got an image of him wearing that baggy blue Umbro shirt, the temporary one.
Will McDonough, maybe.
McDonough, possibly. I might have been on the bench then. I think maybe. Mark Somerville definitely played. Remember that. So Somerville's one of them. I mean, Foreign and Malloy were clearly strikers at start. So he's not going to remember those 2. Ryan Baldacchino?
Maybe.
Yeah, I think Ryan Baldacchino. So are we going to go with Keane, Whitehead, Morley, Murphy? That's 4.
Right.
Somerville, McGill, Baldacchino, and one more. I'll let you pick the final one. Are you going to go Will McDonough? You went with Regine, didn't you?
Yeah, I'll say Will McDonough.
Will McDonough, right. So that's our 8 that we've gone for. So here's the answer to Dan's question for the week.
The other 8 players that day were Peter Keane in goal, Lee Andrews, Lee Maddison, Stuart Whitehead in defence, Peter Murphy, he was still a midfielder then, I think, Ryan Baldacchino, Mick Galloway, and Brendan McGill.
Have we got 4 of them right then? So we got Keane, Whitehead, Murphy in the wrong position, and Baldacchino. Yeah, that was it. So what were the other ones again? There was Lee Andrews, Lee Maddison. My mind's gone blank now. There was 2 more.
Baldacchino.
No, we got Baldacchino. We got that one. Mick Galloway. And someone else. I think, was that it? Maybe, did we get 5? I can't remember now. But basically, we didn't do as well as we'd hoped. So there you go. Good question that from Dan there. So that's an interesting one, that one. There you go. Right, into the second half. It's time to preview the Lincoln City game. And after a week off, we've got the Behind Enemy Lines section back. This week, I spoke to Ben from the Stacey West pod. We talked about the rise of the Imps from the National League to the verge of the Championship in less than a decade. It's a really good bit that actually he goes into a lot of depth about what actually happened with them back when they're in the National League. How Lukas Jensen is getting on for them and their hopes for this season after their promising start. Here's the chat I had with Ben. Yes, we're back with the latest edition of Behind Enemy Lines, where we talk to an opposition fan about their team and find out a bit more ahead of the big game. And this weekend, obviously, we're travelling to Lincolnshire, to Sincil Bank, or the LNER Stadium. I hate sponsorship for stadiums. It's just so frustrating for older ones, at least, anyway. And we're talking to Ben from the Stacey West Podcast. Ben, how are you doing?
I'm not bad, mate. Yeah, all good. I'm very much with you on the naming of stadiums. It's always going to be Sincil Bank to me.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I get it when it's a new stadium. You know, it hasn't really got a name or whatever. That's fine. You know, but when it's a stadium that's been known as whatever it's called for years, it's just silly. It's one of those things I'm quite happy we've never done at Brunton Park. Well, it does worry me because we've got talk of a takeover coming in, and I do worry if they'll look at that as a revenue stream. But it will always be Brunton Park to our fans, whatever happens anyway. Right, well, let's get into it.
So I was going to say quickly there was one thing that I wanted to say on that. That there is the stand that the podcast is named after and the blog's named after, the Stacey West. The club have said, like, without any question at all, that will always be the Stacey West Stacey West stand for the reasons that it's called the Stacey West. So, that's one thing that we can at least cling to in terms of the name.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear. Right, well, let's get into it then. I want to start off by talking about your rise up the leagues in the last decade or so. So you've gone from a team that was struggling in the lower mid-table of the National League, actually up until about 2016, to a couple of seasons ago, 3 seasons ago, you were 1 game away from the Championship. So what changed with your club? Because I think some of our fans might not know the story of how things turned around for Lincoln City. Yeah,
so, I mean, we got a couple of PE teachers in. That's really it. We'd obviously been through the ringer in terms of in terms of club for quite a long time. Dropped out of the league in 2011, and it was just the wilderness is horrendous. You know, it was actually a period of time that I'd fallen out of love with football in general myself. But when we signed Danny and Nicky as managers, it genuinely seemed like there was a change in not only like the fortunes of the club, but the culture. They were very hands-on with everything. And I think one of the quotes that they had when they started was essentially, I don't know any business that's successful when the staff only work for 2 hours a day. And they kind of instilled that culture into everybody in the club, and it really started to change from there. I think putting in that culture and that style, a lot of people said it seems like it's a championship club in the background, but they're in the middle of non-league. Obviously, the success that we had that season was unprecedented. Like the FA Cup run was beyond anyone's wildest dreams, and it funded our training ground. All of the money that we won from that getting to the quarter-final went straight back into the club, and we built a new training facility, which we didn't have for years. Like we were training at an old army barracks with, molehills on the pitches and stuff like that. But that's now been put in place, and that's kind of part of the legacy that they left in the club. Going from, getting back into the Football League was one of the most incredible days, really. Seeing the bank absolutely full I think they said that they could have sold between 15 and 20,000 tickets if they were available for that game. But then from then on, it just seemed to grow, and there was that continued cycle of success, I guess. Having the season when we won League Two, going into it, it felt really strange as Lincoln fans going in as favourites for something, because normally, we're not gonna set anything on fire. You're not gonna set the world on fire with anything we're doing. But we were genuinely really impressed with how the team came together and finished. I mean, again, we're talking about good away days. The away day at MK Dons, when we beat them 2-0, and that was the day the league was won, really. It wasn't on paper, but we all knew it. Was just fantastic. And from then, in League One, the first season that Dan and Nick were there in League One, it was kind of... you could tell their heads were maybe being turned a little bit.
Yeah.
And then there was the game away at Wickham, I think it was, where they kind of said, look, in the press, they said, we're not going anywhere, I don't want to talk about this. And I think there was a bit of an argument with one of the Radio Lincolnshire presenters where he basically said, stop asking stupid questions. And then a week later they'd gone. But I think at that point there was a real worry among the fans. It's like, you have this huge wave of success, and then who do you bring in after essentially, the messiahs? And we brought in Michael Appleton, who I think gets treated unfairly a little bit by some Lincoln fans. Obviously had his first season, which they saw out, and then, obviously got curtailed as well. And then there was the COVID season when we had Brennan Johnson, who's just gone to Spurs for, 40 odd million. It's like, we have Morgan Rogers, who is still, a highly sought after player. Those two in that team were just fantastic. We got lucky, admittedly, with Brennan and Morgan in that side, but it didn't make us a bad side anywhere else. I thought the football that Appleton got us playing was really impressive. It was fast, it was attacking, and in that COVID season, I think it did us it gave us a real benefit, because we had the wage cap, we had no fans in the stadium, which obviously is horrible for the fans, but I think for a young side as we were, it kind of maybe gave them that edge, because they weren't feeling the pressure quite as much. And then the second season, when all the fans were allowed back, obviously, like you mentioned, we that season we got to the playoff final, and having a very muted Wembley was a really strange experience. But going 1-0 up thanks to an own goal in the space of 2 minutes was probably the curse more than the blessing, because it just kind of set us in a mindset, to be honest, of defending it. But the next season. It wasn't great. We lost more games at home than we won, and I think one of the co-hosts on the podcast, a guy that sits behind him, says I'm fed up of seeing Lincoln City lose at home, and then we all were. And ultimately, the end of that season when Appleton left, it felt like the right time. He'd not screwed it up, but it wasn't fantastic. It wasn't brilliant. I think the recruitment was poor in that window as well. We'd signed a couple of players that we thought were going to set the world on fire, but they didn't. And then that brings us to the Kennedy era. And again, Mark Kennedy, first full-time job in football. This is one of those where you look at it, you go, first full-time job in senior football management. You look at it, you go, that's a bit of an odd choice. But I think the fans are really warming to him now. He had a inauspicious first year, I think. Kind of started, and we drew a lot more games at home, which again, you get to a point and you're like, well, we're not losing games this year, but we had an amazing unbeaten run at home, but a lot of them were draws. And then he's kind of instilled his philosophy on the players at the minute, and I think a lot of fans would be maybe wrong to say that they were. Well, I think they probably admit that they were wrong to be calling for his head midway through last season, because where we are at the moment, we've got a solid backroom staff. We've had investment from some folks in the United States who are, again, fantastic people. We've had the pleasure to meet them on the podcast and interview them, and they seem incredibly genuine. They're not here to go, oh, what's that stadium worth? Can we make it into a housing estate kind of thing? You know, it's like they're genuinely interested in football. Like, you can tell that when you're talking to them. And yeah, the future actually really does look bright for Lincoln at the minute. We've got a lot of developments happening around the ground, around the club, and we've finally got to a point where we're not overly reliant on loan players. I know last season we had 7 loan players, so we couldn't play them all, you know, in every game. But this year I think we've only got 2 loanees.
Yeah. Oh, that's not too many, is it? Well,
yeah.
No, 3. Have you got 3 actually? That seems when I was looking at the thing.
Let's have a look. Who've we got?
I might be wrong on that. I was doing my preview thing.
Sorry, yes, 3. Yeah, I forgot about Burrows for a second. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, but no, it is looking really positive at the moment. And yeah, there's a quiet confidence, shall we say, with some sections of the fan base that we could potentially squeeze into the top 6 this season.
Well, that is a thorough roundup there, Ben. Fair play. You've covered most of it there. I think most of our fans have got a really good understanding now. You've sort of covered my question about how Mark Kennedy's done, so I don't need to ask that now. But in terms of your summer transfer business, happy with that in terms of the outgoings and incomings?
Absolutely delighted, to be honest with you. I think the main fear, as I say, was a lot of the fear going into it was, are we going to end up with, you know, another 6 or 7 loan players that we're not going to be able to play? And yeah, it was a welcome surprise when we saw, you know, people coming in. We've brought in the likes of, you know, Jaden Brown at left back. He's had a bit of a quiet start, but, you know, I think quite a few Sheffield Wednesday fans rated him quite well. Brought Ethan Hamilton in, who has just forced his way straight into the first team. Ali Smith from Sutton came in. He's a good player. He's done really well. Yeah, he started against Sheffield United and didn't look out of place against them at all. And then we've got like Rico Hackett coming in from Portsmouth, player that they. When he came in, they kind of said, "Oh, you've taken Rico Hackett, we've taken Anthony Scully," and it's, you know, yeah, we've got the better end of that deal. And I think Rico's proving them wrong a little bit. He's done really well. Lukas Jensen, as you guys, you guys are aware of him. He's come in and firmly cemented his spot in goal. And then the return of Tyler Walker, which was something that nobody really saw coming. But we were absolutely chuffed to bits when he arrived. Even though he's not got a goal yet, but you know, it's probably just around the corner. But yeah, the business has been absolutely solid. All the players are, you know, all the guys that came in are looking like they've added to the squad. And then on top of that, you know, we've previously had Ethan Arahan, who came in last season, and Danny Mandroya as well came in January last season. 2 excellent players that I think will probably be featuring in teams of the season come at the end of the year.
Wow. Again, you seem pretty happy with the players you've brought in, so that's good to hear. Well, not so good here for us, at least, anyway. You've had a pretty good start to the season, haven't you? Take away that opening day defeat at Bolton, which I think didn't look that out of place when you looked at the results they got after that. Mm. Can you keep it up, and what are your sort of hopes, expectations for the campaign?
I think we can. I think we've finally got the depth in the squad that allows us to maybe change games from the bench, which is something we've missed in previous years. You know, I think if we went 1-0 down in the game, you'd start to see heads drop and think, oh, how are we going to turn this around? And we didn't have that ability. But now we've got, you know, like I say, in midfield, we've got Teddy Bishop, we've got Ethan Arahan, Ethan Hamilton, Ali Smith, and, you know, Danny Mandroya, who primarily plays out on the wing but can slot back into that number 10 slot if he needs to. We've got the ability to change games from the bench if we want to. I think whether we can keep it up is a lot massively dependent on fitness. One player that I've mentioned there, Teddy Bishop, I think Mark Kennedy's a big fan of him. He says, you know, he's one of the best players in the division, and he's worked with him for many, many years. I think, honestly, if we could keep Teddy fit for the entire season, I think he'd just be, you know, he'd be £1 million player. But unfortunately, his injury record isn't great. So we have to manage that and hope we can get the best out of him. And at the moment, that kind of means he's being a bit of a super sub. But yeah, I think if we can keep the injuries down to a minimum, because that's previously really, really hampered us, then we can surprise a few people this season. Like I said, I'm one of the people that is secretly hoping and secretly confident. I say secretly, I'm just mentioning it on a podcast. Is a little bit confident that we can sneak into the top 6. In those last few weeks, because there's always one in there. There's always one club that just kind of finds their way in there at the end.
Yeah. Right. Well, we're going to talk about some of the links between the two clubs now. First up, let's get on to it. Dave, discuss. Now, before you answer that, I've got to say, everyone's going to listen to the podcast, going to hear a clown noise there, clown car noise, because we refuse to mention his name on our podcast, but I've got to ask you about him. So if you mention his actual name, all you're going to hear is a clown car noise on the thing, so maybe use his nickname. Probably the best thing to do.
So we know him as Reg, for obvious reasons. Now, this kind of fell into this period when he was at the club. It fell into when I was on a little bit of an enforced hiatus from football in general. But like going back in and looking at it, he's not loved by many Lincoln fans either. But I think the important thing for where we are at the moment is we had a very difficult period between 2011 and 2017 or 2016, and I think he was kind of not instrumental, but he definitely started to put the foundations down for getting us back into the Football League and getting out of the National League, or as it was, the Blue Square. I think the biggest contribution that he made to Lincoln was the fact that he signed Paul Farman, and Paul Farman has gone down in history as an absolute legend at the club during that time.
Played for us for a season as well.
Yeah, fantastic keeper. Absolutely love him. Really nice lad as well. We actually did. Well, Gary actually did a post on his blog recently about divisive managers, and the like to dislike ratio for Reg was 39% liked him and 61% didn't like him. So, yeah, it's when you have again put the win percentage down there of just under 30%. It's like it wasn't the best, but he's far from the worst that we've had at Lincoln. I'll say that much.
No, fair enough. No, yeah, it's safe to say he's not very popular, Carlisle, for what he did and as director of football, and a lot of people put the blame at his feet for how much we were struggling that season when Simpson had to come in and save us. So quite glad to see the back of him, to say the least. Did he like to take credit for everything brilliant that's happened with your club? Because he tended to do when he signed for us. There was a press release when he was appointed into his role, which basically made out that he'd done incredible things at every single club he'd been at, which was quite remarkable. So, yeah.
I mean, if on that list was signed Paul Farman, then he's probably got a point, but that's not much else.
Fair enough. Right, let's talk about players then. Lukas Jensen, how has he settled in with you guys? Because we had him on loan a couple of seasons ago where he made just one league appearance, and then he disappeared off the face of the earth. Even though we had him on a season-long loan, he just didn't appear in any matchday squads because we had two permanent keepers anyway. And he played for Burnley under 21s in a couple of games again. So everyone was it was a long running joke on our pod of, where is Lukas Jensen out this week sort of thing. So he seems to have done pretty well for you guys though.
Absolutely. If you were to have said to us at the start of the season, we're going to sign a permanent goalkeeper, I think a lot of people would probably maybe say it wasn't needed because we've really managed to do well in the lone goalkeeper market over the past few years. I think last season we had Carl Rushworth, for example, who's just been superb. I think it's the one position that makes sense when you're talking season-long loans. But with when Jensen came in, everyone kind of looked at him and went, "What? Why have we signed him?" And then we saw a picture of him. And we're like, "Oh, that's why we've signed him. It's because he fills the goal." But yeah, he's. I think his distributions come under a bit of criticism, but he seems to be working on that quite a lot. And other than that, he seems absolutely solid. He's kept quite a few clean sheets. I think it was 5 in 7 games. I think last time I looked, he kept clean sheets in. Kept a clean sheet against Sheffield United, obviously until the shootout, and then even in the shootout, managed to save a couple there. And if there's one way that you want to ingratiate yourself with the fans as a goalkeeper, it's to save penalties in a shootout. So he's done that despite the the Sheffield United goalkeeper being a bit of a house, shall we say, and chucking his drinks bottle away beforehand because it had the names of the penalty takers on. Lukas Jensen has definitely been one of the signings that we're really excited about so far.
Yeah. Do you know that when he was younger, he was into mountain biking? That was his big thing,
really?
Apparently. He had to decide between mountain biking and football. If you look it up, there was an interview he did with our official website about it when he signed. So, interesting thing worth looking into that, yes.
It was quite funny, actually. I was going to say, it was quite funny when he signed. We had the chance to pop down to the ground and meet the new signings and just record some little stings for the podcast. And it was in the club shop, so it was a little bit busy. And they said, "Oh, do you want to just pop into the little side room?" So I walked into this side room, and there's me at 5'11", and then we've got Ali Smith who's 6'4", we've got Lukas Jensen who's 6'4", we've got Rico Hackett that's well over 6 foot, and I was like, honestly, look like a child just holding a microphone up to people.
Well, I got to interview Thomas Hurley when he signed for us last season, and God, he's just huge. He's just enormous. Like, I shook my hand and he crushed it. It was ridiculous. But my nephew was mascot as well for a game, and bless him, he's only got 5, and he was tiny right next to Thomas. It was ridiculous. But there you go. Right, well, let's talk about the player in your squad in our squad, I should say, who's played for you guys, and that's Luke Plange. What's your thoughts on him? He seemed to have quite a tough time with you guys, but he's had a slow start with us. But although the goals haven't come yet, I think fans are quite impressed with some of his link-up play so far.
Yeah, I wish we'd seen that as well, to be honest. I don't like to sit there and criticise players because I realise how incredibly difficult a job they have for the time that they're on the pitch and the abuse that they get. But he wasn't great. He didn't make too many starts, and when he came on, one thing that I really despise from our own fans is when people boo players leaving the field. But there was a point at which where Luke Plange was booed coming onto the field. It was that kind of a relationship. It was really felt a bit toxic, and I did feel sorry for him. But the thing is, if you're a striker, fans expect you to score, and the fact that he'd not managed to do that in his time with us was telling. Really, I think we were desperate for goal scorers last season because we tended to rely on one or two people. But yeah, when you get somebody in that's got a bit of pedigree behind them, they've been at Derby, they're now at Crystal Palace, they've signed him for £1 million, like you said earlier, and it's just kind of all of that stuff, and then he comes and doesn't score between January and May. You're just like, yeah, that could have gone a bit better, but I don't really see what anybody else could have done. I think
No.
the play around him was fine. It just kind of there was that moment when he got the ball and oh right, okay, he's done that with it. So yeah, it was a disappointing loan spell for sure.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap things up and get your prediction, for Blues fans, it might be the first visit this weekend to Sincil Bank. So what can they expect down at the ground?
I think in terms of the ground itself, we've done an awful lot for the fan experience at Lincoln. I know there's been quite a few people that have come away from the ground as opposing fans and said, "Oh, blimmin' heck, that fan zone's pretty good." So if you do get there, I think the fan zone is probably open from about 12:30 or 12. I'm aware that's probably not likely for too many of you guys coming down from Carlisle to be arriving in Lincoln at 12. But if you do get there, a little bit early, head to the fan village, I think it's called now officially. Basically, it's behind the south stand. I can't remember what it's called, the Real Max stand or something now. But basically, yeah, there's food there. The bars outside are, stocked. We've got an amazing craft beer and independent bar called the Tipsy Imp. Nice. They've got an amazing selection of beers and ciders every week. So get yourself in there. Get yourself a pint from the Tipsy Imp. Get yourself a curry on a jacket potato from Curry Jack's. Amazing homemade curries every week. Really nice guys as well. And yeah, in terms of the experience, it's really friendly. Everyone's there to just have a good time. And like I said before, everybody comes away from the opposition just saying, "Oh yeah, they've done a decent job there as an experience." when you're in the stadium, we've had a lot of work going on recently as well. I think the back of the away stand is currently under development. That's going to be a hub for the community more than the football side of things going forward. But that's brought in a lot of improvements to the ground. Like we've only had one mains water supply to the ground for the past 100 years or so. So at half time, the toilets didn't flush, kind of thing. There was no water there. But that's all changed now with this. The infrastructure that's come in. And yeah, if you stick around, head up to the top of the city, have a look at the cathedral, have a look at the castle, check out some of the bars up at the top of town. It's a really nice place. Lincoln is a really nice city. It's small, but it's a lovely little section of the country that seems to be undiscovered by a lot of people. And some of us would keep it that way, but I'm more than happy to welcome people in.
Good stuff. Well, Ben, you've been very generous for your time. Thank you very much. Before you go, though, we need a prediction for this weekend's game.
I'm going to say 1-0 to Lincoln. I think we've got people coming back from injury now. The likes of, Paudie O'Connor's been poorly for a while. He missed the Sheffield United game. Got Tyler Walker, who may be back for tomorrow. Or for Saturday, I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, there's plenty of people coming back from injury, and I think confidence is just high coming off that. The win away at Sheffield United on penalties. We've obviously not had a game this weekend, so I think there's just going to be a lot of fit and ready to go footballers come Saturday, and I can only really hope that we can build on the strong home record that we've had so far this season. I'm going to say 1-0 to the Imps.
Ben, thanks very much for your time and all the best for the rest of the season after this weekend.
No worries, and you, mate. Cheers.
Yeah, we're always really grateful for the time that the opposition pods give up to speak to us. So thanks once again to Ben. Obviously, as you'll have heard there, we talked a little bit about he who shall not be named, the clown car noise man himself. His name's obviously bleeped out in the bit, so if you're not quite sure who we're talking about, we are talking about him. Let's talk about Lincoln City then, Mike. Had a quite a good start to the season, haven't they, really? After that opening day defeat against Bolton, 3-0, which didn't look that bad a result when you looked at the results that followed it. Since then, they're unbeaten, and there's an argument maybe when you look at the teams they've played. They've not played that many of the better teams, except maybe when you look at it, Blackpool's probably the big one you look at and think that's a good result in terms of beating them 3-0. But yeah, they've done pretty well, haven't they?
Yeah, no, they have. They've had a really good, solid start. I think they're probably... Because I don't think... none of us certainly were picking them out for promotion or anything, were we?
No.
But I think, they're probably... I wouldn't say exceeding anyone's expectations. I think they're, just doing pretty solid.
Yeah, looking at their summer transfer business, what do you make of it, really? The one that stands out for me is Alistair Smith from Sutton. And it sounds mad because, they've got some pretty good names there, like Tyler Walker, who's come back from Coventry, and even Hamilton from Accrington Stanley. But I was hugely impressed with Smith whenever we played against Sutton. Big number 8 in central midfield. He looked a really good player, and I kind of felt like Sutton might struggle to keep hold of him after the second season. It's been proved right, hasn't it?
Yeah, it seems like a good addition. One player that I've always been impressed with there is Adam Jackson, the centre-back. He's a really, really good defender at this level. He's actually got a bit of pace about him, as well as been good in the air, which some centre-backs it's one or the other. All round they've just kind of got pretty solid League One players, really.
Yeah, I mean, Tyler Walker coming back to them from Coventry City is a real positive for them. I don't think they expected that at all to happen. Rico Hackett is someone who Portsmouth were happy to let go, and Portsmouth fans seem to think they got a really good deal from that. And actually, it turns out he's doing pretty well for them. He's really impressed them by the sounds of things. Ethan Hamilton's a name that I'd heard linked with us if Owen Moxon had left to go to elsewhere during the transfer window. We were going to go and look at him. Obviously, he's ended up going to Lincoln. Lad who came up from Man United's academy and has done pretty well at Accrington, hasn't he? So he's another good addition to their midfield.
Yeah, and like I say, he's been playing at this level because I think he was at Peterborough before Accrington as well.
Yeah.
So he's been at this level for a good while, and it's quite a solid player. You know what you're going to get from him.
Yeah. Well, we haven't touched him in much detail there, but our old favourite Lukas Jensen is playing for them. Made himself a hero in the League Cup, didn't he, against Sheffield United with some penalty saves in the shootout?
Well, when he signed for us, we were told that he's a bit of a penalty saving specialist. So that doesn't really come as too much of a surprise that he's been doing that, and he seemingly, because he's their number one, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. Well, I think they were a bit surprised when he came in. They were like, "Oh, who's this lad? Is he any good or not?" But he did fairly well at Accrington then last season, didn't he? So I think maybe not surprised that he's gone into there to be number one.
Yeah.
I fair play to the lad. You know, he didn't really get his chance with us for whatever reason. I think because we had Mark Howard, a bit of experience coming, he was always likely to be left out in the cold. But yeah, he's resurrecting his career and doing really well there. Looking through the rest of their team, Ben House has got a few goals from last season. He's a fairly decent striker too, and I think Lasse Sorensen as well. He's someone who came in as a midfielder. He's playing as a right wing back now, and apparently he's excelling in that role. So he's someone to keep an eye on as well, isn't he?
Definitely. Teddy Bishop as well. He's a good player. He was at Ipswich for.
Yeah.
Well, I think he came through at Ipswich and played like over 100 games for them, and then.
He's had a few injury issues. I think that's the problem, isn't it? I think that's the reason why they've managed to get him, basically, because he probably would have stayed at Ipswich longer, but I think the fact that he's had those problems means that he's had to come to Lincoln to try and get some game time. And
well, he's 27 years old and he hasn't even played 200 games. So
yeah, I mean, you'll think that in comparison, you've got Jack Arm for us, who's 22 and he's on 140 odd.
Yeah,
he'll probably get close to 200 at the end of the season. That's the difference, isn't it, in terms of being able to keep yourself fit. And Mark Kennedy's their manager. He was a coach at Ipswich Town. I think that's the reason, the link there in terms of bringing him in. Done quite good job, hasn't he, Kennedy, this season? I think last season there was a bit of frustration with them because they were drawing a lot of games, from what I remember. And they finished pretty solidly in mid-table. I think their expectation levels have been raised by Appleton a couple of seasons before that, hadn't they? With the fact that they made the playoff final, and obviously the season after that with Appleton, they dropped down to 17th, so it's a bit more of a challenge.
Happens a lot, that, though. Teams that make playoffs often struggle the year after.
Especially a club of the size of Lincoln. I'm thinking back to Shrewsbury Town when they did it as well. At that level, they had a really tough season after, because you end up basically getting all your players picked off. And one of the players they had that season was Brennan Johnson, who's now just moved to from Nottingham Forest to Spurs for 40-odd million. So, when you lose a player like that, he goes back to Forest, you're going to struggle, aren't you? It's going to be a real challenge. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, you look at us. The last two times that we've made playoffs and not gone up, we've struggled the year after.
Exactly, it becomes a challenge because you're behind all the teams in League Two because you've been waiting to see where you're going to be for the following season. So that's the real tough cookie with that one. But yeah, Kennedy seems to be doing quite a good job though, doesn't he, with them? Yeah,
no, he does, and it shows sort of why it's good to stick with someone. As well.
I always remember with Kennedy, he's one of those players I always used to sign all the time on Championship Manager. And back in the day before, I think like towards the end when it was just becoming Football Manager, I think at the end of his career, he was always on the left wing, always sign him up and he'd always be brilliant for you whenever you played. So, good player, Mark Kennedy, back in the day. Yes, so in terms of players in the United squad who've played for both teams, Luke Plange didn't have the most successful loan spell at Lincoln City, I think it's fair to say. But I suppose it's one of those things you probably shouldn't judge too early on players sometimes because, like I said, he's done okay actually since then for us, hasn't he? Yeah,
I think I'd like to see him come on for this one personally. I think he'll probably have a little bit more fire in his belly. And I think from what we've seen of him, like he looked a little bit lazy at the start, but he seems to have had a bit of a kick up the backside and he seems to be full of running. So, I wouldn't object to seeing him maybe come on off the bench after whoever's starting has tired out their defence.
Well, we've got basically, there's an argument, 7 players fighting for those attacking positions, haven't we?
Yeah.
Really? You've got Kayode and Maguire, Blade, Garner, Plange, Edmondson and Butterworth, basically. Yeah. All fighting for those places. And realistically, you're only going to have 3 attackers on the bench, probably. So... 2 players are going to miss out. So there's a real fight for places there. And maybe that's helped spur him on a little bit, knowing that he's not going to be guaranteed that starting place. So he's got to fight for his place. So fair play to the lad. In terms of referee for this weekend's game, Tom Neild from West Yorkshire He's in his 7th season as an EFL referee, having started in 2017. He's taken charge of 3 games so far this season, handing out 13 yellow cards and 1 red card. Last season, he handed out 100 yellows and 3 red cards in 35 games. But also, as part of a PGMOL exchange programme, he took charge of 3 second division games in Japan last season too. It's an interesting little thing, that, isn't it? Yeah, there you go. Do you know what the last United game he took charge of was, Mike?
Playoff final.
The playoff final, indeed. So he owes us a penalty, as someone said, from that.
Yeah, well, it wasn't just that, though, but I thought he had a very poor game in the playoff final.
He was scrappy in places. There was to be honest, the penalty I'm still not sure. I still can't work out because we haven't seen the full replays, whether it actually did hit the player's hand or not. It's impossible to tell from the angles.
Looked to me like it was a stone
It
wall.
looked like it possibly was, but it's very hard to see. What I'd say is that the one he didn't give against when Guy was hauled down, basically, was ridiculous. That was an awful decision, that. But
I remember as well, Mellish's booking in that game should never have been a booking.
Oh yeah, that was ridiculous.
If he wasn't on a booking, he would have closed down their man for the cross that went over Holy's head and went in. So
exactly. Yeah. There you go. Head-to-head wise, we played them quite a few times actually. It's the 75th meeting between the two sides. United, we've not got a great record. United have won 25. The Imps have won 35. And 14 have been draws. So, yeah, not doing the best against Lincoln City. We've got a bit of catching up to do with that. Played for both. So, Dan this season is in charge of this section. He's the one picking out a player each time who's played for both clubs and giving us a little profile on them. I don't know who he's picked. I never listened to these beforehand. So who's he picked for this week?
There's quite a decent list of played for both, but there was only one man whose name stood out, and let's be honest, he's a legend, and it's Dean Walling. Yeah. The Leeds-born defender. Started out at Leeds in his youth career, went to Rochdale, played for 2 or 3 years, quite a few games. He then ended up not many people realise this, he actually played in the Canadian Soccer League for Kitchener Spirit. What a name that is. I think they were only around for possibly 2 seasons, but he had a year over there. He was also, his Wikipedia says he was at Franklin Grizzlies, which I think is some sort of US college team. But I think that was brief because when he came back over here, he landed at Guiseley, and as we all know, came to Carlisle in 91 for several years. About 250 games, some good goals, big goals at the time. Actually, when he left us, went to Lincoln for a couple of years at Doncaster, a little bit at Northwich and Cambridge United, Gainsborough Trinity. Actually, a full international too, Dino. Some people don't know this. St Kitts and Nevis played for in the late 90s. Unfortunately, not when he was at Carlisle, which, it's not a big list of players who've been capped while at Carlisle. But, everyone loves Dino. He's a great fella. Friend of the Brunton Bugle. Lee does need to get the interview episode sorted. Hint, hint. But, that's played for both this week. The one and only Dino.
The only choice he could have made, frankly. If he'd picked anyone else, I would have been disgusted. And I'm still looking forward... Oh, yeah. I was going to say, I'm looking forward to him picking the one for Bolton in a few weeks, because if he doesn't pick Ian Stevens for that, I'll eat my hat. He's got to surely pick him at some point, because he's been holding off on that one for so long.
Yeah.
I think that there's a few options. Shrewsbury... and Bolton are definitely 2 of the clubs he's played for. Cheltenham as well actually had a short spell there, so maybe he'll pick him for them. I don't know, but there you go. Just to go through, in fact, I might as well go through all the other names because it's not actually that long of a list. But Tom Anderson, who we had on loan a few years back, he played there. Derek Asamoah, he had a spell with Lincoln City. In terms of people who've coached and played for both, Dennis Booth I've got down here as well. He played for Lincoln during his playing career. David Browell, I didn't realise he actually had a spell there. And Patrick Brough as well, I completely forget that he must have been on loan there, I think, at some point. Darren Carr, who was an absolute animal of a centre-back, like one of the nastiest pieces of work you'll come across. Lovely stuff. Paul Farman, obviously, had a brilliant time with Lincoln, part of that team that got to the FA Cup quarter-finals, wasn't he? Kevin Gall, Mick Galloway, Josh Gowling, Lukas Jensen, obviously you mentioned already, Richard Liebird, probably less said about him the better. Junior Mendes, as you mentioned there, Mike. Tom Miller, I think we signed him from Lincoln, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. Paul Pettinger. He didn't actually play a first-team game for United, I don't think, but I think he had a spell at Lincoln where he did play a few games. Luke Plange. Kevin Rose, another one most Carlisle fans would rather I didn't mention. Kevin Samwith. Barry Siddle. Trevor Swinburne, who's a hugely popular figure at both clubs. Dean Warling, as I mentioned before. John Ward played for Lincoln during his playing career. And Scott Willis, who was a one-game wonder in that first game of the season under Roddy Collins in the 2001-2002 season. So there you go. Right, let's talk about United then, Mike. Injury-wise, Ben Barclay's the only one who's going to miss out this weekend. Unfortunately, that calf injury is going to keep him out for 5 to 6, 7 weeks. Max Kilsby and Kai Nugent are both out on loan at Annan. Should say about their game last weekend, they lost 2-0 at home. I think it was to Peterhead in the Scottish Challenge Cup. Should say Kai did get man of the match, though. He started the game and played most of it, I think, so fair play to the lad. Good start for him in terms of impressing. So team selection for this one, Mike, what's your thoughts?
I think go with what we had last week. I think can be no arguments with that, I don't think.
Not a question in midfield about whether McCalmont or Gibson's in there?
I think if Gibson's fit, he has to play. Simple as he's likely to create things, and you just want him in the team.
I'd agree with that. I think it's the only position where I would have a question over who you'd select there at the moment. I think, and that's not that either of them being bad. I think it's just there's not a huge amount to choose between the two of them, and I can grasp why you'd play McCalmont away from home maybe in a game like this. It's going to be maybe a bit of a scrap. Like that's where I don't think Gibson played particularly poorly against Stevenage, but it was a bit of a tough one. And maybe could have done with McCalmont in there early for a bit of the scrapping side of it. But I'd give you. I think I'd pretty much stay with the same, and you stick with Kayode and Maguire up front for a while now, don't you? I think as long as they're both fit, just try and build a partnership up there.
Definitely.
Subs, would you make any changes?
No, to be honest. Yeah, I think like Johnny said before, I think Ablade and Garner are your sort of go-to finishers up front, and so and we mentioned before Edmondson. Well, he's behind 4 in the pecking order for me at the minute. Yeah.
Well, arguably 5 with Plange in there as well. So.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, so he's got his work cut out to try and get himself back in, but hopefully he can do that soon. I've got to ask you a quick question though. In terms of we said we'd stick with the same. What's your thoughts on the wing backs so far this season? Do you think they've been as effective as they were last season?
For me, Armour has always been a left back playing as a wing back, and. Yeah, I think he's a little bit, I don't want to say afraid to bomb forwards, but been against better opposition, he's a bit more cautious to bomb forwards. And Back, on the other hand, has been getting his fitness up, so that's sort of a different story there. Yeah. But I don't think either of them would warrant dropping, really.
No. I'd agree with that. I feel like with Jack, I wonder if there's a question soon whether he maybe needs a rest. Because bear in mind, I think soon, I think he'll be getting close to 60, 70 games in a row that he's starting the league. Yeah. Which is a hell of a lot when you think about it, really. Yeah. And, it's easy to say, he's a young lad, he'll be fit, whatever, but they can come to a point when you get a bit of burnout and you wonder if maybe a little rest at some point. I don't think we're quite at that stage, but, we just want to keep an eye on, I guess, isn't it? But there you go. Looking ahead to the next 6 fixtures, Mike, after this one, it's a really tough run, isn't it? When you actually look at it, you've got 4 games in a row after that. You look at it and think it's going to be a real challenge to get a lot of points out of that. Derby home, Wickham away, Peterborough at home, and then Bolton away. No game at this level is going to be easy, is it, for us? But no. Still,
but if we can get something from Lincoln, then we're going into it unbeaten in our last 3 games, going into the Derby game. If we can get something from there, then it's unbeaten in 4 games, going into the Wickham game and so on. So, yeah, hopefully we can get something and just keep this little run that we're on going.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of that, it's prediction time. So what are you going to go for this weekend's game?
I'm going to go bold. I'm going to go for a 2-1 win with goals from Maguire and Garner.
Ooh, okay. I'm going to go for a cheeky 1-0. I was going to go for Maguire or Garner. I couldn't decide. I think I'm going to go for Kayode, though. Kayode to get the only goal in a 1-0 win. Here is Dan's prediction for this weekend's game.
another tough trip on the road. Lincoln always a difficult place to go. They've got themselves established in League One in recent years. I'd be happy with a repeat of last week and a draw. I'm going to go for 1-1, and I think Jordan Gibson's due his goal, which would be another excellent point on the road if we got it, and sets us up nicely for the big game against Derby the following week.
That might be the first time that there's been no picking the same result or same scorer between the three of us this for a while. That actually,
there you go.
Because you usually get at least one, so they're nice little bit of variety for once. There you go. Right, X-Files time.
Well, I was just going to say as well. So obviously the predictions table, you're obviously still top on 5. Dan's on 2. I'm on 0. But it's worth noting as well. So we've done it slightly different this year in that you get 1 point for a goal scorer, 2 points for a result, and 3 bonus points if you get a full house. And I'm still on 0. But anyway, we'll move on from that.
Yes, good luck to you, Mike, in getting points before Christmas this year. Right, X-File section. Not as many games this weekend, but there's still quite a few goals, actually. Then there's a few other bits as well to fill in, so we'll get through these now. Alex Gilliard scored a late equaliser for Bradford City in their 1-1 home draw with Grimsby Town. Bradford are really struggling, aren't they?
Yeah.
Look at this season. I didn't think they'd be right there. I thought, you know what, they'll be right up there in the playoffs again this season.
Me too.
They're really, really struggling. Finding it tough. I watched bits of this on because it was on Sky, wasn't it? And it was not a great game of football, to put it bluntly. So I do wonder how long Hughes can last there before the natives get restless.
Yeah.
Potentially. Adam Campbell is having a great start to life at Crawley Town, isn't he? He grabbed a brace for them in their 4-1 home win over Newport County. He's a weird one, Campbell, because I've said this before. I was always convinced he was older than he is. I thought he was like in his early to mid-30s now. But actually, he's only about 28, 29, isn't he? So, he's still got a chance to have a fairly decent career at Football League level, so fair play to the lad. Here's a name that I didn't think we'd mention as a goal scorer for a while. Kenise Carroll. He scored for Oxford City in their 5-2 home win over Hartlepool United. That's a reality check, isn't it, for Hartlepool fans, that? Yeah. Losing at Oxford, but not that Oxford.
Yeah.
The other Oxford. Fair play. Next up, this was a balmy game at Glanford Park. So Buxton were beating Scunthorpe United 2-1 in injury time in this game. Max Hunt, former Blues defender, he scored for Buxton. Richie Bennett scored for Scunthorpe, and Connor Brown was sent off for Buxton. But the game was abandoned 5 minutes into, I think it was like 9 or 10 minutes of injury time, wasn't there?
Yeah.
And it was abandoned due to the weather.
And the weather looked mental, by the way.
I was going to say, I thought that seems a bit weird. But then you actually look at the pictures, and the bits by the dugout were practically flooding, weren't they? So,
yeah.
Realistically, it was the only decision to take by looks of things.
But as well, some bookies are refusing to void that bet off people's coupons because it went on past the 75th minute as well.
Well, that's the rules, isn't it? Rules are rules. Now, we know what our opinions on bookies are, Mike, but we'll keep them to ourselves. But yeah, the best thing about that is the National League have decided that game will be replayed in full.
Yeah, it's insane.
I mean, just mental, isn't it, really? But there you go. Dave Simonton, he got a brace, scored twice for Workington in their 5-3 win over Basford United. A lot of goals at Workington games this season, isn't there?
Yeah.
I think something like an average of like 4 goals a game at least, I think.
Yeah, certainly get your value for money.
Yeah, definitely. Liam Noble, he scored a goal for Morpeth Town in their 2-0 home win over Gainsborough Trinity. Gavin Riley scored for Queen of the South in their 3-2 win at Partick Thistle in the Scottish Challenge Cup. Good result for them, that. And we mentioned him last week as signing for them, but Brad Young, he scored a goal for the New Saints in their 3-0 win at Hibernian B in the Scottish Challenge Cup. Don't ask how Welsh team is in the Scottish Challenge Cup, but that's the way they do it, isn't it, I think? So
yeah.
Yes, fair play. Other news in terms of ex-players. Charlie Wyke, he won the EFL League One Player of the Month award for August. Fantastic stuff for Charlie, that. Yeah, Adam Campbell was named in the League 2 Team of the Week in the league paper. And Mike Jones was named in the Vanarama National League Team of the Week. So that's Teams of the Week out of the way. 2 internationals to tell you about, and they're both in the Caribbean. What a lovely old job this is, isn't it? Especially for Hallam Hope. Reggie Lamb, he picked up 2 more caps for Bermuda. The first is a sub in a 0-0 draw with the French Guiana. before playing the full 90 minutes in a 4-3 defeat at St Vincent and the Grenadines. And then Hallam Hope, he picked up 2 more caps for Barbados, starting in the 3-2 defeat at home to Montserrat and the 5-1 defeat in Nicaragua. So there you go.
Nicaragua, I think it is.
Nicaragua is, I don't know. I got Piatic, right? So I'm happy with that one. That's the only one that matters this week. I can get everything else wrong. That's it then, Mike. We've covered it all, I think. It's quite a long episode, but I think we needed to cover the takeover potential stuff in depth, didn't we, really, at the start to give everyone a good rundown of the stuff. So we'll be back next week with a review of the Lincoln City game and a look ahead to what's going to be a big game against Derby County at Brunton Park. Really looking forward to that one.
And our friends, the Piatics, would be there as well, I should imagine.
Yes, hopefully. So we'll maybe try and grab a bit with them, maybe. Probably not, but we're hoping maybe if all things go through well and the takeover happens, we'll get them on the pod and have a chat about what their plans are and stuff like that. That's the hope anyway, at least. So there you go. Mike, thanks for your time.
Cheers.
Thanks everyone for listening, and up the Blues.
Up the Blues.